I didn't see my mother cry until the day she showed up at my apartment, shaking like she'd been hit by a truck. Her makeup was ruined. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. And when she finally looked at me, she whispered the words that made my stomach turn. "He took everything and he says it's your fault." I stared at her calm, almost numb, because I already knew who she meant. Uncle Chris. The man who destroyed our family. The man she chose over my father. The man who smiled in my face for years while stealing from us. And the most insane part? My dad didn't disappear because of the affair. My dad disappeared because he found out something even worse. And when I finally learned the truth at 22, I realized my mother wasn't just a cheater. She was the reason my father almost ended his life. And now, after all these years, karma didn't just find her. Karma dragged her by the throat. I'm Ryan, 24-year-old, and for most of my life I thought my childhood was normal. A decent house, a decent school, a dad who worked hard, a mom who always smelled like vanilla perfume, and an uncle who was always around. If you had asked me when I was 13 who my favorite adult was, I would have said my dad. But I also would have said Uncle Chris, because Uncle Chris was fun. He was the type of guy who bought me video games when my parents said no. He taught me how to throw a baseball. He called me kiddo. And he was always laughing. The kind of laughter that made you feel safe. I grew up thinking he was family, not by blood, but by love. That's what my mom always told me. Chris is basically your uncle. He's been in our lives forever. And my dad would nod and smile. But now that I'm older, I realize something. My dad didn't smile because he agreed. My dad smiled because he was trying to keep the peace. My dad, Mark, owned a small construction company. Nothing huge, but enough that we were comfortable. My mom didn't work much. She did small jobs sometimes, like event planning for friends. But mostly she stayed home. And Chris was my dad's business partner. That's how he was always around. They had started the company together years ago. My dad was the hardworking, quiet one. Chris was the loud one who could charm anyone, and together they made a good team. At least that's what everyone said. Even at family dinners, Chris would sit at the table like he belonged there. He'd joke with my mom. He'd slap my dad on the back. He'd steal food from my plate just to mess with me. And my mom would laugh like he was the funniest person alive. Sometimes I'd catch my dad watching them, not angry, not suspicious, just distant, like he was watching something he couldn't stop, but I was a kid. I didn't know what that look meant, I just thought my dad was tired. The first time I felt something was wrong, I was 14. It was a Tuesday, I remember because Tuesdays were always boring. School, homework, dinner, same routine. But that day I came home and the house was quiet, too quiet. My mom's car was in the driveway, but she wasn't downstairs, and the TV wasn't on. That was weird because my mom always had something playing. I called out. "Mom," no answer. I walked upstairs and I heard a voice, Chris's voice. And then my mom's laughter, soft, low, not the kind of laugh she used with me. It was different. It made my skin crawl. I froze at the top of the stairs. Because I knew something about that laugh. I had heard it once before, when my mom and dad thought I was asleep. But now she was doing it with Chris. I walked toward her bedroom. The door was cracked open, and I saw a shadow move. I saw Chris's arm, and I heard my mom whisper, "Stop, you're crazy." Then she giggled. And I swear to God, my stomach dropped like I was falling off a building. I didn't open the door, I didn't scream, I didn't confront them. Because my brain refused to accept what it was seeing. So I turned around and walked back downstairs like a robot. I sat on the couch. I stared at the blank TV, and I waited. After a few minutes, my mom came down. Her hair was messy, her cheeks were red. Chris followed her, smiling like he'd just won something. My mom looked at me and forced a smile. "Oh, you're home early." I just nodded. Chris ruffled my hair. "Hey, kiddo. You got taller." I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, and he didn't flinch. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look nervous. He looked confident, like he owned my house, like he owned my mom. That night, my dad came home late. Later than usual, he walked in, saw Chris sitting at the dinner table, and his jaw tightened. My mom jumped up like she was too excited. "Mark, Chris stayed for dinner." My dad looked at Chris. Chris grinned. "Hope you don't mind. Your wife made one of those casseroles. You know I can't resist." My dad didn't smile. He just said, "Yeah, great." He sat down, barely touched his food. I kept looking between them. Something felt wrong, and I noticed something else. Chris kept touching my mom. Not in a gross way, but in small ways. A hand on her shoulder, a brush of her fingers, little things that were too familiar. And my mom didn't pull away. My dad watched it, quiet. His face looked like stone. After dinner, Chris stood up and said, "I'll see you tomorrow, buddy." He slapped my dad's back like they were best friends. Then he looked at my mom, and the way he looked at her, it was like he was saying something without words. Then he left. The second the door closed, my dad stood up. He didn't yell, he didn't accuse. He just looked at my mom and said, "We need to talk." My mom's smile disappeared. "About what?" My dad stared at her, and I could tell something snapped inside him. He said, "Ryan, go to your room." I didn't move because I was terrified. My dad raised his voice just a little, "Ryan, now." So I went upstairs, but I didn't go to sleep. I sat on the floor near the stairs listening, and I heard my dad say something that still haunts me. "How long?" My mom said, "Mark, don't do this." My dad said, "How long?" Silence. Then my mom started crying, and that's when I knew. I wasn't imagining it. It was real. My mom was cheating with Chris. The next day, my dad didn't go to work. He stayed home. That alone was terrifying because my dad never stayed home, not unless something serious happened. He sat at the kitchen table with papers spread out. Bank statements, business documents, folders. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. I came downstairs and he looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot. He said softly, "Ryan, I need you to pack a bag." I blinked. "Why?" He didn't answer. He just said, "Pack enough for a week." I felt my heart start pounding. "Are we going somewhere?" He nodded. "Yeah." Then he paused and his voice cracked. "We're leaving." That's when my mom came downstairs. She saw the papers. She saw my dad's face and she froze. "Mark, what are you doing?" My dad stood up slowly. He held up a folder. "I'm finding out what you and Chris have been doing." My mom's face turned pale. "What are you talking about?" My dad laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was the laugh of someone losing their mind. "Don't lie. Don't insult me." My mom started shaking her head. "Mark, please, it's not what you think." My dad slammed the folder on the table so hard it made me jump. "It's exactly what I think." Then he looked at me, and his voice got quieter. "Ryan, go upstairs." My mom reached out toward me. "Ryan, honey," my dad snapped. "Don't you touch him." I had never heard my dad yell like that. My mom started sobbing. "Mark, please, please." "I made a mistake." My dad walked to the front door and opened it. "Get out." My mom froze. "What?" "Get out, go to Chris, go to the man you're obsessed with." My mom screamed, "I live here." My dad stepped closer to her. His voice was calm, but it was deadly. "Not anymore." Then my mom said something that made my blood boil. She pointed at my dad and shouted, "You're doing this because you're jealous. You're always working. You never pay attention to me." My dad stared at her. Then he said, "I worked so you could have everything." And he looked like he was about to cry. Then he said the sentence that changed my life. "Chris didn't just sleep with you, he stole from me." My mom went silent. Her crying stopped. And in that moment I knew my dad had discovered something much bigger than an affair. That night my dad drove me out of town. No warning. No goodbye, no explanation. We didn't tell anyone. We didn't even pack much, just clothes and some cash. I sat in the passenger seat, holding my backpack, staring out the window. My dad drove like a man running from a fire. I asked, "Where's Mom?" My dad didn't answer. I asked again. "Dad, where are we going?" He finally spoke. "Somewhere safe." That word stuck with me. Safe from what? From my mom, from Chris, from something else. We drove for hours. At one point, we stopped at a motel. My dad paid in cash. He didn't use his card. He didn't want a record. I remember thinking, why does my dad look like a criminal? What is happening? Inside the motel room, my dad sat on the bed and stared at the wall. I asked him, "Dad, are we coming back?" He looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Fear, not fear of losing money. Not fear of losing the house, fear of losing me. He said, "Ryan, you need to understand something." I said, "What?" He swallowed hard. "Your mother made choices, bad choices." I whispered. "She cheated." He nodded. "Yes," I felt my chest tighten. "With Chris." My dad closed his eyes. "Yes." Then he said, "And it wasn't the first time." My stomach turned. "What do you mean?" My dad looked like he was about to throw up. Then he said quietly, "I think she's been doing this for years." I couldn't breathe, because suddenly my entire childhood felt fake. All those family dinners, all those jokes, all those moments where Chris was around, were they all lies? I asked. "Did you know?" My dad shook his head. "No, I didn't know, but I should have." He laughed bitterly. "I was blind. I thought that was it. I thought the affair was the reason we left." But then my dad reached into his bag and pulled out the folder. He handed it to me. I didn't understand what I was looking at. Numbers, accounts, statements. My dad said, "Chris has been stealing from the company." I stared at him. "Stealing?" My dad nodded. "For years." Then he leaned forward and said, "And I think your mother knew." That hit harder than anything, because cheating is betrayal. But cheating and helping someone steal from your family, that's not betrayal. That's evil. I whispered, "Why would she do that?" My dad's eyes filled with tears. "Because she loves him more than she ever loved me." I will never forget the sound of my father's voice in that moment. It wasn't anger, it was pure heartbreak. After that night, our lives became something out of a movie. We moved to another state. My dad rented a small apartment. He didn't tell anyone where we were. He changed his phone number. He even stopped using social media. I asked him once, "Dad, are we hiding?" He looked at me and said, "Yes." And I was just a kid. I didn't understand, but I trusted him because he was my dad. And because I could see whatever happened back home destroyed him. For the next few years, my dad worked like a machine. He got a job under someone else. No business, no pride, just survival, and I watched my father shrink. The man who used to stand tall, confident, proud, was now quiet, careful, paranoid. Sometimes I'd wake up at night and hear him on the phone, whispering, arguing, then hanging up and sitting in silence. I once asked, "Is Mom looking for us?" He didn't answer. He just said, "Stay away from strangers. Don't tell anyone your full name." That terrified me, because it felt like we were running from something dangerous. When I was 17, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name. My dad saw it and his face went pale. He opened it carefully like it was a bomb. Inside was a single page. My dad read it. Then he crumpled it in his fist. I demanded, "What is it?" He hesitated. Then he handed it to me. It was from my mother. It said, "Ryan, please come home. Your father is lying to you. Chris loves you. I love you. We can fix this. Mark is destroying everything out of jealousy. Please, I miss my baby." I felt rage rise inside me. Jealousy, that's what she called it. I looked at my dad. He whispered, "She doesn't get it." Then he said, "Chris is trying to find us." My blood went cold. "Why?" My dad looked at me, and his voice was quiet. "Because he thinks you belong to him?" I didn't understand what he meant, but something in his tone made my skin crawl. Fast forward, I'm 22, I'm in college, I'm finally living a normal life. My dad and I have peace, or at least I thought we did. One day, my dad calls me. His voice is shaky. He says, "Ryan, I need to tell you something." I immediately felt dread. I said, "What?" He hesitated, then said, "Chris is dead." I froze. "What?" My dad swallowed. "He died in a car accident last week." I didn't know how to feel. Part of me felt relief. Part of me felt numb, because even though I hated him, he was still a big part of my childhood. Then my dad said, "Your mom called me." I felt my stomach twist. "Why?" My dad's voice got cold. "Because Chris left a letter," I whispered. "A letter," my dad said, "and in that letter he confessed everything." My hands started shaking. "Confessed what?" My dad paused, then he said, "The affair wasn't the worst part." And that's when my entire world shattered. My dad told me to come home. When I arrived, he was sitting at the table, the same way he sat years ago when everything broke. Only now he looked older, more tired, and in front of him was another folder. He said, "Sit down." I sat, my heart was pounding. He slid the papers toward me, DNA results, court documents. And then I saw it, a name, Chris. My throat went dry. My dad's voice cracked as he said, "Ryan, Chris might be your biological father." I swear my entire body went numb. I couldn't hear, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't even blink. I whispered, "No." My dad's eyes were filled with tears. "I raised you, you are my son, but the timing, your mom, she admitted she was with him before we got married." I felt like I was floating outside my body. I said, "So you don't know?" My dad shook his head. "I didn't know until now." Then he said something that destroyed me. "I stayed because I loved you. Even if you weren't mine, I loved you." That's when I broke. I started crying like a child, not because of Chris, not because of my mom, but because I realized my dad loved me enough to raise me through betrayal. He loved me enough to sacrifice his entire life for me. But the worst part? My dad told me my mother always suspected, and she never cared. Because to her I wasn't a son, I was leverage, a weapon, a way to keep my dad tied to her. That's why she cried when he left. Not because she loved him, because she lost control. A week later I agreed to meet my mother. She wanted to talk. She met me at a cafe. The moment I saw her, I didn't feel love. I felt emptiness. She ran to hug me. I stepped back. Her face crumpled. "Ryan, my baby," I stared at her. "Don't call me that." She froze. She sat down. She started crying instantly. "I missed you so much." I leaned forward and said, "Did you know?" She wiped her tears. "Know what?" I looked her in the eyes. "Did you know Chris might be my father?" Her face went white. And in that moment I had my answer. She whispered, "Ryan, please don't hate me." I slammed my hand on the table. "You destroyed everything." People turned and stared. I didn't care. I stood up and said, "You cheated on Dad. You helped Chris steal from him. You lied to me my whole life, and now you want to cry?" She reached for my hand. "Ryan, I was lonely. Your dad wasn't there." I pulled away. "Don't you dare blame him." Her voice cracked. "Chris loved me." I laughed, a bitter laugh. "Chris didn't love you. Chris used you, and you let him." She sobbed harder. I made mistakes. I leaned closer and said quietly, no, mistakes are accidents. You made choices. Then I walked out and I didn't look back. A year later, I found out what happened to my mother. Chris had left her nothing. He had drained her savings. He had taken loans in her name. And when he died, his secret accounts were discovered. The money wasn't for her. It was for himself, for another woman, a younger woman. My mother had been played like a fool. The woman who thought she was the winner ended up being the biggest loser. And then she showed up at my apartment, crying, shaking, telling me, he took everything. And I looked at her and said, you chose him. She fell to her knees. Please help me. And for a second, I almost felt bad. But then I remembered my dad's face. The motel, the fear, the years we lived like ghosts, and I realized something. Some people don't deserve forgiveness, not because you're cruel, but because forgiveness becomes permission. I told her, you didn't just betray Dad, you betrayed me. She whispered, I'm your mother. I said, no, you gave birth to me. That's not the same thing. Then I closed the door. My dad is doing better now. He's not rich like before, but he's peaceful. He laughs again. He smiles again. And he told me something last month that I'll never forget. He said, Ryan, you saved me, even when I didn't deserve saving. And I hugged him, because whether or not we share blood, that man is my father. Chris is dead, my mother is alone, and I'm finally free. Because the truth is, the man who disappeared with me wasn't running away from responsibility. He was running away from a monster and trying to save his son.